Hey, will regulated militia be necessary to the security of a free state? The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is great to be with you once again. It is great to be home as well, by the way, back in Farmville, Virginia after a week at SHOT Show. I do want to offer my apologies. I had a bit of an equipment failure while we were actually in Las Vegas, and so was not able to do as many Cam and Companies as I was hoping for from the 2020 SHOT Show. But we're going to work on that. We're going to get that piece of equipment fixed. We'll be hitting the road once again here before long, heading to CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. We'll have a couple of days of shows from there coming up in just a couple of weeks, I guess. But right now, I want to get to today's interview with my friend Kurt Schlichter, townhall.com columnist, who actually has a couple of pieces. One in particular that I want to focus on, advice to gun owners in Virginia, basically. What happens now that the Second Amendment rally is over and done with? And then where do we go from here? Take a look and a listen to our conversation with Kurt Schlichter. Kurt Schlichter, it's good talking with you, sir. Thanks for joining us bright and early.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Now, you've got a couple of columns recently that I want to talk about. Let's start with Virginia and the tips for patriots in Virginia that you came up with in response to and in the wake of the Lobby Day rally, which was a week ago, when tens of thousands of Virginians showed up at their state capitol. You've got some ideas for Virginians who have to live under the thumb of Governor Ralph Northam these days.
I do, and I think what's important is we get painted, those of us who believe that the Second Amendment actually matters in the 21st century, as some sort of lunatics who are looking for some sort of violent solution to all our problems. When in reality, the simple fact is armed American citizens, except for, as far as political, the use against tyranny has been almost, non-existent. I mean, you can point to very, very rare circumstances. Use of guns against criminals is very common. Mm-hmm. But in 240 years, we have not had to all take up our guns and throw out a tyrannical government. We just haven't. Deterrence has worked. But, a lot of leftists want to confuse the ability, the fact that we insist on retaining the ability to veto a tyrannical government with some sort of desire to do it. The simple fact is the Constitution still works, and we still have remedies outside of it, which you guys in Virginia are exercising. I think it's beautiful. You guys are going out there. You realize, look, a lot of us didn't vote. A lot of us thought, it's just another Democrat. Democrats, Republicans, they're not that different. And, 20 years ago, maybe you could have made that argument. But now you have Soros-funded activists with an agenda to screw you by taking your guns, turning you into felons, releasing criminals, and messing with every aspect of your life. And I think a lot of people have woken up to the fact, they got woke, Cam,
Yep.
To the fact that these are a new kind of Democrat, and you can't stay out of politics because politics won't stay out of you.
That's exactly right. And I got to tell you, I mean, I think that you've hit the nail on the head in terms of what that has meant to so many Virginians, because I've talked to a lot of these folks who, they may have showed up and voted during presidential election years, but it was tough to get them to go and vote in these, off-year elections like we have in Virginia. And as you say, they don't like politics. They don't want to be involved in politics, but they're understanding now that politicians want to be involved in their life. And so, however reluctantly, these are folks who now are getting involved. And you talk about this. You talk about turning that anger into votes, right? If I can just quote from your column here, you say you must register to vote, and then you must vote only for Republicans. Then you need to make sure you don't nominate any wuss Republicans during the primary. Next, you must reinvigorate your party. Why don't you run for a seat on the local GOP committee? Organize. The mobilization for gun rights sanctuaries and the March on the Capitol prove that if you organize and act, you will win. And I got to tell you, I think that is such a fantastic idea because the party structure in Virginia, I don't know how it is in California, but it's anemic. At the county level.
I wish ours was anemic. That would be a vast improvement. Here's an example. And I had come into contact with some of these California guys, and one guy, and, you know, I'm in LA, so I think every district's now Democrat. And the guy said, I've been in charge of this district for 20 years. And he was proud of it. And I'm like, okay, you've lost for 20 years. You keep losing.
Right.
That's not okay. I think you guys are a little further down the path that California's gone down. And I think that they thought, well, we can just fully Californiaize you overnight. They didn't boil the frog, frankly.
Yeah.
And that would have been a smarter thing, but you know, they got greedy. And I think people have woke up, and I think for every one person who braved the 25-degree weather and frankly the threats from the governor to come out and protest, I think there's probably about 50 to 100 who didn't and who will vote accordingly.
I think you're right. You know, we've seen a couple of polls in Virginia taken over the last few weeks showing Donald Trump doing really well, actually. I think the last poll I saw had him beating every candidate except for Biden. That was just outside of the margin of error. And I suspect that Virginia is it's flippable this year because we don't have those local elections on the ballot. So the first chance that Virginia gun owners are going to get to go to the polls and send that message is in November of this year. And, you know, again, Donald Trump, I think, is going to be a beneficiary of that. We have a U.S. Senate seat up. I believe it's Mark Warner's Senate seat. And I suspect that whoever the Republican nominee is going to be is going to get a boost from gun owners. And we've got a couple of congressional seats that I think are very flippable. The 2nd District in Virginia, the 7th District, which is represented by Abigail Spanberger, who won in that blue wave in 2018. You know, that's a seat that used to be held by Dave Bratt. It was held by Eric Cantor before him. And that's a seat that I suspect, I know that area pretty well. I've been to a lot of the Second Amendment sanctuary meetings in that area, in that congressional district. And you're right, gun owners are fired up. And this is going to be the next opportunity, the first opportunity they get a chance to send that vote and to send that message and to send some anti-gun politicians packing.
Well, I would urge the gun folks to reach out to people who maybe aren't Second Amendment woke, but who don't like the idea of criminals being put out on the street, who don't like the idea of new laws to change neighborhoods through zoning, and all and all the other kind of liberal lefty things that they do. The gun thing is only one part of the picture. Wait till you have bums living on your street, because that's coming. That's coming. I am down the road on it. I see it. When I walk on a street in Los Angeles, I have to play hopscotch over piles of human waste and hypodermic needles. That is what these people bring everywhere. And you look at it, it's happening in Seattle, it's happening in San Francisco, it's happening in Denver. Wherever these same kind of activist liberals take charge, the same kind of filth comes along.
Yep, absolutely.
It's not just gun folks.
No, you're right. And listen, I mean, there are going to be all kinds of issues that I think the gun issue has taken up a lot of the oxygen when it comes to the media coverage of what's happening in Virginia. But there are all kinds of awful bills that will impact Virginians in all aspects of their life that are coming down the pike. Now, when it comes to the gun bills itself, you talk about when these bad bills become bad laws, the inevitable court challenge is going to ensue, and I believe that to be the case. But you also talk about civil disobedience. When these laws get on the books, what will we see in these Second Amendment sanctuary counties? What will we see from Virginia gun owners? Not in terms of violent resistance, as you say, but peaceful, passive, nonviolent, noncompliance.
I see a lot of sheriffs refusing to enforce these laws. I see jurors refusing to convict. And we're going to see heavy pushback. They have got to win this. They are not just going to roll over. Mm-hmm. They are going to, you will have judges screaming at juries. You will have the state government trying to fire sheriffs and police officers and so forth. And you need to stand firm. Now, the problem with civil disobedience is it's civil disobedience. You're breaking the law, and there are consequences to that. But what it does is what it did in the a previous great civil rights thing. It shows the injustice, and frankly, for an insurgency, one of the things that insurgents do is force the tyrannical regime to overreact. When you see, when people see normal law-abiding people arrested, they're going to get mad. They're going to say, wait, why are you arresting him? Look, there's a bum breaking into cars on my street. Cops can't talk to him because he's an illegal alien and he's special. And then this guy, my neighbor, who helped, shovel the old lady at the end of the road's driveway out when it snowed last time, he's getting hauled away because he had guns. He's never going to hurt anybody. He's never hurt anybody. What the hell is this? They get mad.
Yeah.
And it's extremely effective. And the Democrats will overreact. They will attempt to stamp this out. And if the people of Virginia let them, then the tyranny wins.
Talking again with a friend, Kurt Schlichter. And I said the same thing, by the way. I had a piece a few weeks ago talking about why I don't believe Ralph Northam can actually win this fight. He can put the laws on the books, but enforcing them is going to be another matter entirely. And, you talk about the prospect of jury nullification, for instance. I got to tell you, Kurt, I have a really hard time, trying to imagine in, let's say, Campbell County, which was one of the first to pass a Second Amendment sanctuary resolution. First of all, I have a hard time imagining that the sheriff is going to arrest somebody for having a 20-round magazine if they become illegal. I have a very difficult time imagining that the Commonwealth's attorney is going to spend time trying to prosecute that case. But I also, I find it impossible to imagine that a jury of 12 individuals are going to convict their neighbor of a felony for continuing to possess one of the most commonly owned magazines in the country, right? A 20-round magazine. I have a very, very difficult time seeing that come to pass. Now, in Northern Virginia, in Fairfax County, yep, I imagine that those laws are going to be applied and enforced. In Richmond, Virginia, yep, probably the same thing. But I do believe that throughout much of the state, you are going to see that resistance from both law enforcement and then a jury of a defendant's peers if any of these cases actually end up going to trial.
Well, you need police who will turn the other way. You need district attorneys, Commonwealth attorneys, whatever you guys have out there, who refuse to charge them. And remember, they get elected by the local people.
Right.
They need to know if you charge these things, 500 of us are going to show up at the election. Nobody cares about a DA election, but they will this time.
Oh yeah, they will. Absolutely.
And if you screw our people, we will throw you out. And they will get the message. Jury nullification is a tougher thing. I'm a lawyer. Lawyers hate that because they want the law as presented by the judge. Mm-hmm. And the DA certainly wants that. And judges will tell you have to promise to follow the law. And, the fact is with jury nullification, people promise to follow the law as given by the judge and then do whatever the hell they want. People are going to have to ask themselves, am I, and legally you're bound by the oath, but are you bound by your oath if you're forced to take it? That's a moral decision they'll all have to make.
Absolutely.
And I have a feeling some of them will say, well, if you're telling me, essentially telling me I have to convict my neighbor for something that I don't think is a crime, well, I'm just not going to do it. You don't get to put a gun to my head.
No,
and I think they will do it. O.J. Simpson.
Well, there you go. And when it comes to prosecutors, we already have seen in the state of Virginia a number of prosecutors, both those elected last November and some who've been in office longer, who've said, I just don't really think that the state's drug laws, when it comes to marijuana possession, I don't think that they're just. We're not going to prosecute these cases anymore. So we already do know that, frankly, the Democrats have given us the playbook on how to resist, quote unquote, and how to use the discretion that's available to sheriffs and these prosecutors to simply say, look, these are not going to be a priority for my office. I don't believe that these are just laws, and I don't believe that my constituents are going to be served well by enforcing these laws.
Well, that's, and it really is taking their place. That's why they hate the name Sanctuary City. Mm-hmm. It drives them crazy. Because, foreigners who shouldn't even be in our country, should have what aren't their rights protected. And, normal Americans who are here illegally should have their right. It doesn't make any sense. But no, they hate it. But it is the playbook. I would prefer to resolve things in the legislature. But if you have a legislature that passes unconstitutional laws, and remember, no one's saying that immigration laws are unconstitutional. They're just saying we don't like them.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely,
a huge difference.
And look, and I hope it doesn't get to that point. I mean, I do hope that, and I expect that a lot of these laws are going to get overturned, particularly if we get a good Supreme Court decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York City. But again, this is I think what you're talking about is the fact that despite what Ralph Northam says or the Attorney General Mark Herring might say, there are a lot of tools in the toolbox. For gun owners and for Second Amendment supporters to #resist, these gun control efforts.
Well, look, you have no moral obligation to submit to the destruction of your constitutional rights. None. Any law they make that violates the Constitution deserves no respect and no obedience. You have no moral obligation. You are free to resist it as you see fit.
Knowing again that there may be legal consequences for that, but we're talking about the moral obligation, right?
That's true. There will be legal consequences, and you should use the procedures set forth in the Constitution and the and civil disobedience as appropriate to deal with these things. A lot of people always look at the end state, the worst case scenario of owning guns, throw out the tyrants with our weapons, which is something that could theoretically happen, hopefully never will, and hasn't in almost 250 years. But we are so far from that because we have so many things. And the most obvious one's the ballot box.
Yeah.
The most obvious one. Why are we in this situation? Because we didn't organize and vote.
Yep. Exactly.
Let's organize and vote. Let's use our Constitution to have our voices heard. That's what you guys did. This week, or last week, you came out, in a wonderful, peaceful protest. My gosh, you guys cleaned up afterwards. You literally left the area cleaner than before you came. And you totally rejected the clowns, the dorks, the weirdos, the racists, the morons. I mean, just looking at that crowd was inspirational. The Democrats talk a big thing about diversity. But you guys lived it.
Yeah.
There's every kind of America, every brand, every flavor. And all together, celebrating our right to be citizens and not serve. It was super inspirational. We need to see more of it. And it's great to see Americans coming out and saying, okay, our voice is going to be heard. And that just outrages the left.
Oh, absolutely.
You're supposed to work hard, shut up, and obey your betters. And you didn't.
Yeah, we're not going to. No, it was an incredible thing to be a part of. I mean, being in that sea of people, that boisterous sea of liberty, as Jefferson called it. I mean, it was you got goosebumps, and not just because it was freezing cold out there. Now, listen, before we run out of time, I do want to ask about your brand new column, which is sort of the flip side of this, right? You talk about what Virginians can do to resist these unconstitutional gun laws, but your latest piece is kind of wondering, well, if Democrats think Donald Trump's a dictator, then why haven't they taken up arms, right? Why aren't they taking to the streets and overthrowing the government if we live, in fact, under a dictatorial rule?
I'm picky about when people start talking about dictators. My wife was actually driven from the country she was born in, and part of her family in prison because of a dictator. I served in Saudi Arabia. I felt the fear on the street of a dictatorship. I served in the ruins of dictatorships in Kosovo, Ukraine. And so I'm a little picky about it. So when you start talking about dictators, I mean, I'm thinking, the ruined villages and stuff that I walked through. And when I hear that crap being thrown around by the likes of Jerry Nadler, that refugee from Willy Wonka's factory, I get a little irritated because it's stupid and it's insulting. And if I really thought America was a dictatorship, I mean a dictatorship, not just it has a government I don't like, and gosh, it's really hard to work on to win people over, to my side. I would gladly take up arms if I had to defend the Constitution. So why haven't they? If he's a dictator, why are they sitting on their hands? If he is a dictator, why are they so cowardly as to not do what free citizens must do and replace the dictatorship with a constitutional government? And here's the other thing, Cam. If Trump's a dictator, why are they so eager to make him the only guy who has guns? I don't get. I mean, and of course the answer, duh, is it's all a lie and a scam.
Yeah.
But it's insulting, and it's stupid, and it's divisive in the wrong way. I don't mind divisive. I like clear differentiation. But when you start telling people that, the constitutional system, everything's so bad, the Constitution doesn't apply anymore, which is what the Democrats are essentially saying, that becomes a problem. In my new book, which I will be sending in for Regnery tomorrow, called Defame, the 20 most obnoxious lies about Donald Trump and you, I kind of talk about it in a couple ways. But if these norms and values are important, norms like an objective free press or due process are vitally important, aren't they most important when somebody you despise is in charge? Isn't that when it's most important to honor them, where they apply the most? Or when it's hard, you just throw them out? Because then they're not really principles at all.
Absolutely. Curt Schlichter, as always, man, it is so good talking with you. Thank you for everything that you do. Good luck with the new book. You're turning it in tomorrow. When do we have a release date for it?
I'm turning it into my agent, who is also John Bolton's agent, who may be busy today.
Probably just a little bit.
I'll turn it in tomorrow when his calendar's a little more clear.
Do we have a release date?
I have no idea.
Okay. At some point in the near future.
I assume it'll be out in the summer. I don't know at this point. My job's just to write the damn thing.
There you go. All right. Well, listen, man, I appreciate you taking some time. Of course it's brilliant.
Of course. I'll take a few weeks, and then I'm going to start on my next Kelly Thermal novel.
Ooh. All right. Looking forward to that.
I've been writing books straight for about 6 months, so I don't know what I'll do with all my free time.
I still don't know how you do it, but I'm glad that you do. Curt Schlichter, make sure you read his column at Town Hall. Follow him on Twitter at Curt Schlichter. And Curt, we'll do this again soon, man. Appreciate it.
Looking forward to it, man. Thanks.
Meanwhile, we do still have, obviously, our eyes on what's going on in the Virginia legislature. Don't want to put the cart before the horse, after all. And we don't have any bills that have reached Governor Northam's desk yet, although I expect that will change probably in the next couple of weeks. Now, the biggest question right now is what's going on with House Bill 961. That is the sweeping gun ban, magazine ban, suppressor ban, trigger activator ban. It allows individuals to maintain possession of their banned firearms as long as they register themselves and their guns with the state police. This bill has, but their magazines, their suppressors, their trigger activators, if they continue to possess those items that they legally possess today, if this bill becomes law, they would become felons. Now, this is one of the big priorities for Governor Ralph Northam. What's interesting about House Bill 961 is it has not yet received a single hearing in a legislative committee to date. That tells me that there is still some trouble. In fact, we know that this bill, in its current form, is in some trouble. There are 4 Democrat senators who have said they cannot support this legislation as it is currently written. So I suspect that behind the scenes, you are seeing some intense lobbying efforts by Democrats to those 4 Democrat senators. But you're also seeing some pretty intense lobbying on the part of Virginia gun owners for those 4 senators and really lawmakers across the state. I do believe that this bill is going to start moving at some point in the future. It's probably going to be changed a little bit, but it's not going to be anything that gun owners and Second Amendment supporters are going to be able to get behind. We will, however, continue to keep our eyes on House Bill 961, as well as all of the other bad bills that are making their way through the legislature. Right now, let's get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, which also, by the way, is an armed citizen story, and today's Recidivist report. We will start there with a story out of York, Pennsylvania, where this gentleman now facing charges. That's a Wadey Danfora. He's 30 years old. He's now charged with kidnapping to facilitate a robbery, aggravated assault, as well as illegal possession of a firearm, all of which are felonies, as well as misdemeanor counts of simple assault, unlawful restraint, and false imprisonment. The York Dispatch says that Danfora was arrested back on January 24th. He's being held at the York County Prison. The incident occurred several days ago, but what I find most interesting about this story is not necessarily the most recent charges that Danfora is facing, but the fact that Danfora has such a lengthy criminal history. The York Dispatch noted back on November 20th of 2017, so a little more than 2 years ago, he was arrested in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania by the U.S. Marshals Service, a suspect at the time in an October 2017 shootout in York, Pennsylvania, in which he was shot in the buttocks. He was charged with being a convicted felon in illegal possession of a firearm, carrying a firearm without a license, as well as reckless endangerment. And again, that picked up by the U.S. Marshals tells me that was a federal charge, but we don't know the outcome of that case. Danfora also has a prior conviction for his role in a 2013 prescription drug forgery ring. So this guy, multiple felony counts to his name. And yet he's back out on the streets, able to allegedly commit these crimes. Meanwhile, you got the Democrats in Pennsylvania who are far more interested in targeting legal gun owners than ensuring that guys like this remain behind bars. Our armed citizen story of the day from Rindge, New Hampshire. Not quite exactly sure where Rindge, New Hampshire is, but a store clerk there in Rindge ended up firing at suspects after he was stabbed during an armed robbery there at the convenience store. It happened just after 9:30 Friday night in Rindge, New Hampshire. The robbers entered the store, according to WMUR, with masks, one with a knife, one with a gun. They jumped the counter. They attacked the clerk, stabbing him in the stomach. One of the men, attacking this clerk, and that is when the clerk was able to get his gun and fired back as the two men fled. Sergeant Rachel Malinowski of the Rindge Police Department said, I can confirm that as they were leaving, my clerk fired several rounds in their direction. We are still processing that information. Do not have any information as to whether or not these suspects were hit. Clerk taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, thankfully. He has since been released. Investigators, meanwhile, looking into whether or not this robbery is connected to a recent armed robbery in Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire. Sergeant Malinowski said the suspects did jump the counter in both cases, attacked the clerks in both cases. One clerk was injured. One wasn't. She said, I do think that there are some similarities. So we'll keep an eye on that story, and hopefully store clerks there in New Hampshire are going to be armed for their protection. Now, our good deed of the day from Cape Coral, Florida, also again an armed citizen story, where two women say that a stranger saved their lives after a man tried to assault them at a bar in Cape Coral. This is a crazy story. It happened again over the weekend. 53-year-old Henry Lesniak Jr. is now facing several charges, and Ashley and Emily Gallagher are thanking the stranger that came to their aid. Basically, Henry Lesniak Jr. Was buying a group of women drinks. Ashley Gallagher said, I think he was trying to hit on my daughter-in-law and definitely get her to go home with him or whatever it was. And she says, I think when he realized that wasn't going to happen, that's when he said we were taking advantage of him by spending his money. She said all of a sudden, boom, he turned violent and angry. So the group tried to leave, get in their car, and that's when Henry Lesniak allegedly chased after him. Emily Gallagher says, we saw this white pickup truck, and honestly, he had no choice but to say yes. We just screamed help, begging him to let us into his truck. Amir Rossi was behind the wheel of that truck. He says it just got heated. It got heated so quick. He says they ran in front of my car. They jumped in my truck, and they were like, go, go, go. And the next thing I know, he said, this guy is reaching in my car trying to grab me. And he said, that's when I got my firearm. And at that point, he realized that I had a gun, and he backed off, and he disappeared. That should have been the end of the story. It apparently was not. Henry Lesniak allegedly got into his own truck and then rammed Rossi's truck several times. That's when Rossi pulled out his gun, fired several shots into the back of Lesniak's truck, and then held him at gunpoint until police arrived. Emily said, I just yelled out like, God, please help us, save us, make sure I go home safe and alive. Amir Rossi told WINK News, quote, I just did what I would want anybody to do for me and my family. He said, I appreciate it. I don't look at it as being a hero. I just look at it as doing what was necessary to be done to protect them. So there you go. Amir Rossi in the right place at the right time and willing and able to do the right thing, thanks in part to the fact that he had a firearm on him to protect himself and those strangers. And he is today's, good deed of the day. So there you go. That's going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I do want to thank you for being a part of the program today. Make sure that you are keeping up with everything in the world of the Second Amendment by visiting bearingarms.com for the latest Second Amendment news and information. We'll be back tomorrow here on Bearing Arms Cam & Company with more of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. Thanks again for being a part of the program. Don't forget as well, you can subscribe to Bearing Arms Cam & Company at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and townhall.com's podcast page. You can also become a VIP member of Bearing Arms, get exclusive content, commentary, analysis, and more. You can do that at bearingarms.com. We certainly do thank you for your support. Appreciate you watching, listening, and sharing the news today. And we'll see you back here tomorrow with another brand new edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company.